Alright, today on the table I have the Ruger 1022 and the Marlin 60. Now, if you were to purchase these firearms brand new, the cheapest you could go in would with both models, the Marlin 60 is about $65 cheaper than the Ruger 1022. Loading the firearm, the Ruger 1022 has a detachable magazine. It's always a pain to figure out how to get it in there. When you master it, it's a little bit easier. With your Marlin 60, you got a tube right here. Now this one's cut back a little ways, so it doesn't have quite the capacity as the full-length ones. But a serious issue with this is you're putting your hands in front of the muzzle when you load this. Now the idea here is to pull this tube up to right there, hold it, obviously with your hand in front of the muzzle, and then drop in your rounds right there. Put your tube down, and this has got a cutout for the round, so it's supposed to keep you from putting them in backwards. Now when we were kids, what we'd always wind up doing is putting the rod in our back pocket, lining up the rounds on your hand, put your hand over like this, and scooping them up. So with the full length ones, it was terrible. No muzzle control at all. When dealing with a malfunction with the Ruger 1022, what you're going to do is remove your magazine, pull your bolt to the rear, lock this open, and then you just put your finger in there, and you get your thumbnail or fingernail or knife or whatever you have behind the casing, pop the casing out, reinsert your magazine. Now to get the bolt to release, you can't just pull it back. You have to pull it back and then push on the top of this release right there and let it go. With your Marlin 60, because of how this setup is, what you have to do is take out your tube, dump out all your ammunition, then you're going to need like a glasses screwdriver or something, because this is the size of the opening you got to work with. Hold your bolt back, usually something like this, and then fish out the casing with your glasses screwdriver. Now this does have a last round hold open, so it'll lock open on your last round, you load it, and then you just gotta release. I really wish that feature was on the Ruger 1022. I wish this had a last round hold open and then just a release. So you're not gonna know this is out of ammo unless you're counting your shots, or until you drop the firing pin on an empty chamber. Balance of the rifle, the Marlin 60 is slightly ahead of the receiver. It moves up just a little bit more if you have a full-length tube and this is full of ammo. It's somewhere in here where this grip pattern is. So you have your arm a little bit more forward. Your Ruger 1022 is right where the magazine is. I've always liked that because I change mags. And I just come like that and go back to work. Now my friends, they always had the Marlin 60s, and because they're so easy to mount a scope on it, there's just a little rail right there. Every single one of them had scopes. They could always out-group me. I think a lot of that had to do with the scope, but I do feel the Marlin 60 is more accurate than the Ruger 1022. But I never cared because all their Marlin 60s broke. They'd come to my house and have like electrical tape wrapped around here because the tube broke loose. The barrel, it's just got a single pin that goes through it. That would always be broken off. The tubes never work right. As soon as they get a little bit of carbon in there, they don't push down right. So it always have feeding problems. And the action's extremely hard to clean without totally disassembling the rifle, which none of us knew how to do. So it'll pull back and it gets stuck back, and it just always jammed. They were jam machines. Don't get me wrong, if they would have been properly maintained, it wouldn't have been that issue. I never had that problem with this. All I did to clean it, because I didn't know how to clean a gun back then, was lock your action open. And I didn't know WD-40 was a cutting agent. I just hose this with WD-40, hose it with WD-40, hose down the barrel with WD-40, wipe with a rag, close it, wipe with a rag, run a patch down the chamber, or the bore. And those Ruger 1022s I had when I was a kid, which was two of them, one with a scope, one without, but I always ran without a scope, are still around today. Not a single one of those Marlin 60s are still around. They were all broken, or they just got gummed up to the point where they wouldn't function anymore and sold. So, like I said, if you're looking for accuracy, this is probably the rifle you want. If you're looking for reliability, this is probably what you want. You can put a scope on this. You got to take out these screws right there. Then you put a rail on it. The scope goes on top. Now the Marlin 60 has some weird rifling. It's like 16 groove or something like that. That might also have something to do with the accuracy. This is just your 6 groove rifling, but this is a hammer forged barrel. Safety is pretty much the same on both of them, except for your Marlin 60s in the rear. I always liked my Ruger 1022 because I could just run my finger like this, slide it down and pop it off safety. Your Marlin 60, you can do something similar, but your hand position's got to be in the back, which isn't bad if you're walking a lot, because your hand just kind of goes right there. Then you can click it off and engage. Both of them going back on safety, you have to break your hand position, come around, or use your other hand to function it. On the Ruger 1022, there's 2 set screws in the back to adjust for elevation. Then your windage, you'll be drifting the front sight. Your Marlin 60, there was a couple of different designs. Some of them had like this thing you slid down, it'll push up the sight. That was pretty much what I dealt with all the time. This one actually has a screw you turn down right there for elevation, and then your windage, you would drift this. But you're probably going to run a scope on a Marlin 60. Overall length, the Marlin 60 does have a longer barrel, so it is a longer rifle. Both these firearms I think are totally great, but I do feel they have different jobs. If you're going to be shooting a lot of ammunition and putting a lot of use on it, I'd recommend the Ruger 1022. If you're not going to be shooting that much, or you're going to take better care of your rifle, you know, like not give it to kids, the Marlin 60 will probably be just fine. But thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. Leave in the comments below about your personal experience with the 2 rifles, which one you would pick, and why.